Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Basstravaganza. This episode is going to be about brown trout fishing in the Cowichan River. Since I recently had a stroke, my speech is impaired along with my right hand, with just most of the video editing. I'm publishing a video I had already made up for a fishing club in Victoria. There are a bunch of useless old farts called the Victoria Golden Rods and Reels. Heck, half of them are even older than me. And they showed it at one of their meetings. So I've added a bit more onto that, and I'm publishing it here. Hi, my name is Richard Best. I live here in Nanaimo, and I publish a video series onto YouTube called Humpty's Basstravaganza. It follows the adventures of a semi-fictional character named Humpty Dumpling, who lives in an old Volvo, and as he says, he spends 1/3 of his life out fishing and another third of his life recovering from the last time he went fishing, and spends the rest of his life getting ready to go fishing again. And we kind of envy that guy in some ways, but other ways I'm glad I'm not him, although he does look a lot like me. Anyway, as you can guess from the title, a lot of his fishing is he likes to go bass fishing, and a lot of that fishing comes to place right in this here boat right here, the mighty bullship. So to give you an idea of where I'm at, if you start out at Scotts Falls from the parking lot, I'm pedaling my bike about 45 minutes up it's the old rail grade, the Cowichan Greenway, I guess, and maybe 45 minutes will get you up to the 70-mile trestle. That's where it's legal to start spin fishing. It's fly only above there. About 2/3 of the way up, there's a logging road that crosses, and actually guides have got keys to that road, and they can drive down there and launch a drift boat from the river down there. So these are a few short clips from one of my previous Basstravaganza episodes. You can see if you're the first one on the road in the morning, there's an elk hanging out there. He gets out of my way. You can see his big footprints here. Been digging up the road. You can see the old road that crosses, and that pink arrow is down in that area is where you can drive actually down there and launch a drift boat if you have the key to the road. I don't. You can see the relic channels there indicated with the red lines. The river shifted its course some decades ago. It used to go through there, and now it doesn't. You can see further up, the blue line, there's a man-made spawning channel dug in there, and I don't think it's legal to fish in there. I don't fish in there. But there are beaver dams in that relic channel, and in springtime brown trout will go up there to feed on the fry, and you can get brown trout up in that relic channel. So that's where I'm heading to. So I'm going to be fishing within that pink circle, pink oval area behind the beaver dams in that area, and you can see that there's a black bear hanging around there, eating skunk cabbage first thing in the spring, and one day there were some otters hanging around in there. Lots of fish go up and down there, so I guess the otters eat brown trout too. And you can see the otters heading back down toward the main river there, and I'm going to start fishing where that white arrow is behind the beaver dam that makes that pond. My giant topwater lures would just scare any fish in this little pool. So I'm going to start with fishing with spinners in this old relic channel. So you can see me sneaking up here stealthily. 30 years ago I would have crept in there on my hands and knees like a panther silently. Now when you get old and fat, it's legitimate to just slide along on your fat butt, as long as you don't stand up and spook the fish, because it's very shallow out there. And I'm going to make a practice cast. You've got only one chance here. You're going to either spook them or catch them, one or the other. I'm not using a topwater lure on this. I'm starting out, it's way too shallow in here. I'm using a tiny little spinner. So I'm going to make a practice cast and then throw it out and hope I don't spook the fish, and who knows if there's one out there or not. Never know until you try. Bingo! Hooked up to a nice Bruno here. I love the jump on this one. You can replay it with the editing, and you can actually flip the video upside down and you make it look like the fish is actually jumping out of the side of the mountain. So this one is hooked up, and I didn't have a net with me, so I got to bring it into the beach here and make sure my hands are wet, and bring this guy in and have him pose for the Basstravaganza before I let him go. So you can come back here in a few weeks and the water will be down, and there might not be another big brown trout up here for another 6 months, but boy, there was one nice one in here today. So that's a good way to start the day. It's a nice brown trout. It was about 17 inches, I think. Back into the river with you, buddy. I'll see you in a few years and you'll be twice that size. So now I'm fishing up behind another one of the beaver dams in here. You can see nobody ever goes in here. So, and I'm in gumboots, so I can't get through this swamp. The deep water's on the other side. But there's fish in there, and they're biting on my little spinner. They just keep missing. And one hit, and he missed. And you can see my little spinner here. And they're out there, but how do you catch them? And there's another hit. Missed it. Single barbless, and then it comes right, another hit, missed it, and then right in this channel, watch this, bang, right in the weeds there, in that flooded grass, just a little brown trout. But you can see that they're so smart, but they're so aggressive when they get in the mood to bite. So this one goes back in the river. And just upstream from here, I got introduced to this place by doing riparian planting back when I was in Cowichan College in the 1990s. And I hooked a 6 or 7 pound brown trout on a spinner in this very spot. I've been looking forward to it for 20 years to go back there, and bang, right on the exact same spot. It's changed now, and it's not as good as it used to be. These channels change a lot as the beavers change their plans and as the floods go by. Oh, I was sure that was a 7 pound brown trout there. So I'm going to switch the camera, get my idiot cameraman to point the thing the right direction. Oh, I'm sure that's an 8 pounder, maybe 10 pounder. And I'm going to make another cast in there. I'm sure I'm going to catch a fish up here. So you can see this spot. It's very hard to get near without waders through the mud. And throw it up there, and sure enough, I get another hit. And I am so stoked. I'm so convinced this is going to be a great big brown trout. And kind of a little bit of a letdown when it turned out to be not quite as big as I had hoped. But anyway, I did get a bite. So heading up to it, this is a lower spot down closer to the river here, and that's much shallower than it looks in there. It's hard to throw a spinner in there without snagging on the bottom. So I'm throwing it way up. I'm kind of staying low behind that log there, and sure enough, I hooked into another brown trout in here, and you can see me bringing it in here. It's hard to get it. Hard to get over there in my gumboots without getting filling up my boots with water. So I'm trying to come up with a plan of how to get this fish released and get it to pose for the Basstravaganza before I let him go. And I finally did come up with a plan anyway. Another nice little brown trout from these backwater sloughs. Thank you, beavers. Really really struggling with finding a way to get at this fish without getting water in my gumboots. This is a better spot for waders, actually. The funny thing is, there's a backwater behind the first dam here, and when the water went down, I went back in there, and all the driftwood and little bits and pieces of wood catch in there. And among the other bits and pieces of flotsam and jetsam, there's a nice little brown trout, huh? There were about 20 flip-flops and other people's shoes that fell off and floated down the river and ended up in the driftwood there. So I'm going to stop the movie for a moment just to show you this next spot. You can see this, another beaver dam. I'm sneaking up low behind it. And there's a bunch of grass shielding your view. Now if the cameraman had just broken that grass down before setting up the camera, you could see what you're doing, but he's an idiot, and he didn't, so it ruined this beautiful scene. So you can see I'm carefully lining up my cast and then tossing my little spinner in here. And you know, again, you've only got one chance here. You're either going to spook them or they're going to bite, and it's very unlikely that you're going to catch a fish in a shallow little pond like this. But watch this big brown trout chase my spinner right up almost to my feet. He almost came out of the water after it. I couldn't believe it. Look at him. Just, you can see the V wake as he's following that spinner. And you'd think that he was looking right into my eyes, that he would never bite again, but I've got one more possible chance. He might have swum back across to the deeper water on that far shore. I may possibly be able to make a perfect cast back in there. Is there any chance that right at my feet again? That is a beauty brown trout. That's about 3 or 4 pound brown trout right there. Now, look at the idiot cameraman. Why don't you get it in the view, you dimwit? But anyway, you can't see what's going on, but I'm trying to get this fish in. A couple times I got it in by my feet, and I just spit the hook before I could get it on video. You can see it thrashing around in the grass there. That was a beauty brown trout. And lost forever on video due to the ineptitude of my cameraman. Story of my life. So now, switching gears, a little bit later in the spring, I went down below Scutts Falls. There's a logging road bridge there and a huge deep pool right below it. And I snuck down there in the middle of the night thinking I might get a hit on one of my homemade topwater lures in there. I threw them all around, never got a bite. But you could hear these brown, every few minutes you'd hear a sound like somebody just slashing a big sword in the water. And of course, it was pitch dark, but you knew it wasn't some conquistador with a sword. It was big brown trout that they were feeding on the fry that were moving downstream in spring. And so I tried my homemade topwater lures. I tried Rapala lures. You'd think they'd bite on a Rapala lure. They wouldn't bite on a Rapala. But I finally was able to get this one on a spinner, throwing a spinner in amongst those feeding brown trout at like 2 o'clock in the morning. This was all happening back in the days when I was spending an enormous amount of time experimenting with my homemade topwater lures made out of super cyper cedar. So you can see the basic plan here. Take a piece of super cyper cedar and you whittle it, sand it, and into the shape of a fish. And then you take a drill and you drill holes in the tail and you install some lead in the stern there and put some fins in, give it a paint job, and next thing you know it looks like a fish, right? And it's modeled after a legendary bass lure called a Zara spook. And the idea is that the center of mass is in the stern, so when you twitch this forward, the stern wants to go
wants to keep moving and the bow wants to float. So it absolutely will not go straight. It's either going to go like that or it's going to go like that. And if you get a rhythm going, you can go like that. And it's called walking the dog, and it's diagnostic of the Zara spook. And as I mentioned in one of my previous episodes, if you talk about walking the dog with another kind of lure pal, you just look like a dope. And anyway, that's the idea. So you throw these around for bass. Here's another yellow perch imitation, but same concept. You see, this one's eating a little minnow, right? And anyway, that's the basic plan. So here's a rainbow trout imitation. You get the idea, right? So I started throwing these around for smallmouth bass here on Vancouver Island, and I got into some nice fish. I made some episodes of the Basstravaganza about that already, and lots of video that I never published. But anyway, I started thinking, are there any other fish on Vancouver Island that's intelligent enough to bite on my sophisticated presentation? And they're certainly not salmon or like rainbow trout or steelhead or cutthroat trout are never going to bite on these, but maybe brown trout. So I made up some special ones with single barbless, just intentionally for the Cowichan River. You can see this one here, it's the same idea, but it's rainbow trout and it's a single barbless hook, right? And this one here is like a little brown trout, right? A little baby brown trout. And this one here is a beauty. This is it started out as a rainbow trout, and it gradually evolved into a brown trout. And anyway, it's got potential to be a good lure. And so anyway, I decided to take them out and try them out on the river.
So in my memory, I thought that these brown trout expeditions had happened over a period of years. But I see from my video archive that they're all from 1 year. I guess I got frustrated and went fishing somewhere else. But just watching this stuff again makes me think that there could be a future in it if somebody ever took the time and effort to figure out how to actually hook the fish and keep them on a hook long enough to actually reel them in. As you'll see by this video, I could fool them into biting. I just couldn't keep them on a hook. So here you see that I pedaled my bike up to the 70K trestle. It's fly fishing only upstream from here, but downstream from here, I can try my big homemade topwater lures. I'm converting my weapons of bass destruction to another battlefield. Will the fish here be intelligent enough to bite on them? I've been testing them in my top secret underground laboratory, which also serves as my bathtub. I painted a few that look promising to resemble a little brown or rainbow trout. One of these prototypes has a really bouncy, lifelike action. It looked and acted like a baby trout chasing after bugs on the surface. So let's toss this bad boy out onto the river. Actually, this is a dangerous thing to do. Never leave your rod unattended. If you have a lure made out of super cyber cedar tied onto it, because a big old brown trout might come charging right up out of the river and grab that lure and swim off with the rod. You can see I've got one of my homemade topwater lures on there. That was a great lure as it turned out. And this is the first time I'm ever going to try it in the Cowichan River. Throw it around in springtime and see if I can get some brown trout to bite on it. This is the first cast I ever made with this lure. It looks too shallow here to ever fool a fish into chasing a big topwater lure like this. but it only takes 10 seconds before a hungry Bruno comes up to take a slash at it. But the single barbless hook fails to connect. I'm destined to replay this scenario over and over in the days to come. So that was a promising start to my brown trout topwater career, but I didn't get another bite at the next spot down below, and then I found that the trail along the bank disappeared. So I gave up on crashing through the bush, and I decided to come back another day to another spot. So here I am a few days later, below the outlet of the relic channel. So now I'm back a few days later, and you can see me sneaking up into this big, deep pool below those S-bends there. And you know there's got to be a big brown trout out there, so I'm hiding behind this bush, heaving my lure out there, and watch this giant brown trout come up and just noses at my lure and turns away at the last instant. That was a great big brown trout right there. So I know they will hit it anyway. So you can't see this fish, but I was standing there and I did see it. And that was a great big brown trout. That was 5 pounds plus for sure. But obviously it's hard to get a hook up on that great big wooden lure with a single hook, single barbless hook. So I'll wade up to the next pool, throw it out, and watch this big brown trout just come up and jump it. And he headed downstream, and I had him on for a while, turned to mug for the camera, and he spit it out and got away. Story of my life. But that was a nice fish there. So now I'm back a few days later. I didn't get nothing at that spot where I got the big swirl the other day. So before I throw out in the deeper water here, I'm going to throw right upstream and let my lure drift along just outside that log, even though I know it's too shallow there. In fact, it's so shallow I'm not even paying attention. I'm giving up on this cast, and watch this brown trout come charging in and rip at this lure. And it came into such shallow water, it got the eagle excited. And the eagle flew over. You can see me looking up at the eagle. Watch this brown trout come. So that's strike one. Let's try another cast. Drifting over the spot where I hooked a big fish the other day. And it looks like there's nothing there, right? It floats right. Look how far this lure floats. And you'd never think there's a big brown trout sitting right under it, tracking it all the way down, and gets down into the shallow water. Kaboom! At least I'm consistent. Look at that. Like somebody dropping a bomb in the water out there. So, 2 for 2. I move up the street. On the right is actually the outlet of the old relic channel there. I'm throwing it way up toward the top of the riffle there in the backwater. And kaboom! Another nuclear explosion. That was a great big fish out there. That was a great big brown trout. This number 3 hits in this same pool. And I'm just reeling the lure in. Another one hits it. That's 4. Look at that hit. And they are not shy. They're such, you never know there's fish like that in the river by canoeing down the stream, and then you throw that lure out there. So throw it out again, drift it back right in front of me. There can't be another fish in this pool, right? I mean, it's got to be fished out by now. I haven't caught any, but I'm sure scared them. But darn if there isn't one more in there. Look how long that lure drifts down. Finally, it's right out in front of me there. And another big brown trout comes up and shakes us at it. So that's 5 in this one spot. Boom!
So, as you can imagine, I was really frustrated by this point after multiple long bite trips up in there to get at the fish, and after all the work I put into these lures, and finally found one that got hits, but I just couldn't land these fish. So I did something immoral and also illegal. I swapped over my single barbless hook for a single hook that had a barb on it, and I hiked up to the next pool, and I was expecting a trail. There's no trail. I had to crash through the bush. I kept hanging my line up. I went to make the first cast into the next spot. The knot was good, but the line broke, and you could see my wonderful lure snapping right off the tip of my rod, sailed right across the river and landed on the gravel bar on the far side. I could see it, but I couldn't get to it. It was gone, gone, gone.
So I tied down another homemade lure. It wasn't nearly as good as the one I just lost. It didn't have the same bouncy action.
I just broke off my lure, my brown trout lure. Switched to a rainbow.
There had to be fish here, so I tied on another lure, a rainbow imitation. This lure didn't seem to have nearly the same mojo or lifelike action of the one I'd just broken off. But it got hit anyway. Another swing and a miss, the story of my life. But I could still see the spot where my deadly brown trout imitation lure was lying on the gravel. I just couldn't get over there to retrieve it. Well, that was the end of the deep water I could get to by bike, and the sun was getting higher in the sky, so I gave up on my homemade lures for that day. But I went back a week later in my pontoon boat, and I stopped at that exact spot to look for my magic lost lure.
So this is the spot where I lost my first Cowichan special topwater lure. I was standing over on the other bank over there, and I threw my cast and my line broke, and it landed somewhere right around here. There's elk prints here and human prints, and right where I was guessing my broken off lure might be, there's a rock cairn. I wonder if somebody got my lure.
This is a plan that will probably only work early in the morning or late in the evening. And if a big Bruno won't bite on the first cast, it certainly won't on the second or the third. So you want to cover a lot of water if you use this approach. And it would be way more effective casting these lures out of a drift boat compared to hiking all the way up there and then crashing through the bushes just to make a few casts. When I pedaled back to my car that day, I'm sure I had big plans for continuing this research into brown trout and super cypress cedar, but I seem to have got sidetracked. Probably something to do with topwater bass or summer steelhead. I made one more trip back that fall, and then never again. The salmon were spawning. Maybe that's why the Brunos didn't seem interested in hitting on top water. I didn't get any bites around the S-bend, so I pedaled down to the big deep pool at the drift boat launch and tied out a spinner. I had a couple of good fish hit, but I didn't catch them. I'd actually got on my bike to head home, but I changed my mind and decided to tie on a topwater for one last kick at the can. Way down at the bottom of the pool, there was a spot you could not reach with the spinner, but you could throw out a topwater lure and let it float down over the tail out of the pool where the biggest, meanest Brunos love to stake out their turf. You can't see what's happening because I have the camera set up too far away. So let me describe it for you. An enormous brown trout, at least 7 or 8 pounds, came up from the depths, pushing a bow wave like a trident submarine, heading straight towards my lure. It made a huge swirl and missed. I thought that was the end of it, but the fish was hot for that lure. You could see the wake in about a 10-foot circle as it turned right back around and made another huge lunge from behind. I wanted to publish it here. It looks like nothing much, but that was the biggest wild brown trout I've ever seen. And it bit on my lure twice. And if it's still there, it must be bigger now. Well, that's the end of this episode. You'll notice by the new video clips that I can't talk very well. That's the way it goes when you have a stroke. And now I appreciate this old video even more. When I shot it, it seemed like the opening chapters of a book I was going to write, but I never got back there to write more chapters of this interesting story. And it's fading into the mists of the past. Maybe it will serve as an inspiration for others to develop the topwater concepts I was working on here into something that would actually catch a fish.